My first book, which I mentioned earlier, Architectural Temperance, Spain and Rome in the early 18th century, was a spin-off of my doctoral dissertation. So that was where I first put together the early modern world, Ibero-American world, Spain, Rome, and 18th century ideas. And that book led me to places I didn't anticipate, because one of the case studies in the book is a Spanish church in Rome that was funded entirely from silver in Peru, modern day Bolivia, at the silver mines of Potosi. And that took me to 18th century Latin America, which then made me realize that, Cuba is not off limits. Somehow when I was growing up, I somehow, I don't know why, stupidly, believed that somehow Cuba was off limits. It has to do with the whole exile community of my parents' generation that endured the loss of their homeland and everything that that generation has experienced. So I grew up thinking that, Cuba was off limits. But the more I kept understanding about the early modern world, the more I kept having this desire to go to Cuba and smell it, walk it, see where my parents grew up, where they went to school. And it reached a boiling point that around 2000, I just had to go. So I went. And that opened up the beginning of research on Cuba that has culminated in two books. One that is already out, it came out about 2 weeks ago, on the Cuban-American artist Emilio Sanchez. Emilio was born in 1921. He died in 1999. I never knew him. I never knew who he was. And I serendipitously came across him one day while I was researching at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. I was going through various 18th and 19th century prints and drawings. And my wife and I were leading a trip to Cuba around 2013 for the museum where she was working at the time in Connecticut, the Bellarmine Museum at Fairfield University. And so I asked to see if there were any Cuban drawings. And actually, I did a quick online search at the Met, and I came across this one drawing, a graphite on paper of a Cuban shack. And it looked to me like a 19th century drawing. It's like, wow, this is really stunning. Who is this? And I said, Emilio Sanchez, never heard of him. When was this done? And I said, 1959, you've got to be kidding me. Who is doing this? So I asked the person working in the prints and drawings if there were any more. And I remember she said, no, not online. You're gonna have to go to the card catalog and you're gonna have to search the old-fashioned way. So I did, and I came across an entry on, I think it was something obscure like Cuban architecture. So I asked if they would bring that box out, and lo and behold, it contained 250 drawings, watercolors, ink on paper, lithographs of Cuba that Emilio produced in the 1940s and 50s, including sketchbooks. And on top of that, they were not cataloged. He had donated them in 1965 when Hyatt Mayer was the head of prints and drawings, and they were received. And they've been sitting in cylinder boxes for 50 years. And so that really got me going. I said, wow, here's a guy who does exactly what I love to do, draw and paint architecture, landscapes, people, and he's 1950s. It's not 1750. It's actually, fairly recent. So it opened the door to mid-century Cuba to me, and now that book is out, and I will be giving a talk at Books and Books on August 25th. And that book, Emilio Sanchez in New York and Latin America, traces his formation at the Art Students League in New York, at the Escuela de Bellas Artes in San Miguel de Allende, and his work in the 1940s and 50s in Cuba, traveling the islands of the Caribbean, Brazil, elsewhere, and exhibiting his work in France, Mexico, Cuba, New York, Miami, in fact, and elsewhere. So I'm very delighted with that book. And at the same time, I have a book with my colleague Jean-Francois Lejeune at the University of Miami called Cuban Modernism, Mid-Century Architecture, 1940 to 1970, that will come out later this year in November. And that book will be the first English language comprehensive look at the modern movement in Cuba, not just on the island, but outside of the island as well. Comprehensive in that it's an extensive bibliography, extensive footnotes. I don't know why, but Cuban scholarship is woefully inadequate in being scientific. And we wanted to produce a work that would open the doors, open the floodgates, that would allow future scholars to work on Cuba without necessarily having to go to Cuba. This is what I learned from Joseph Brickwood. He had such an extensive breadth of knowledge that he shared it with people. He would build communities of scholars. He was the antithesis of the academic squirrel who hoards their acorns, right? Keeps their acorns to themselves. Joseph would just give them away. And in doing so, would build these fantastic communities of scholars. And so this book is aimed at opening the floodgates, saying, hey, you're interested in Cuba? This book is a starting point. And from here, there's plenty of room for more. And that's what, and I'm very proud of, the book's not out yet, but I'm very proud. We have a photographer who received a Knight Foundation grant to go photograph on the island. So in addition to extensive archival material from the Cuban Heritage Collection and elsewhere, by the way, the University of Pennsylvania has the Mario Romagnach archives, which we have used extensively, and other archives. We also have extraordinary photographs by Sylvia Ross. And so this book is being published by a German editor, Berghauser, in Berlin, and should have global distribution. And we're very excited about how that is going to unfold.